Hello, everyone. It's Congressman Blake Moore here. Thank you so much for joining. For those of you that called in, thanks for those of you that answered that sometimes annoying call that comes to you. I hope to be able to use this opportunity to share what we're up to. We had to put a little pause on holding telephone town halls on the official side during the political blackout period because of the election process takes on this year. So I am very much excited to be doing it with you all. I'm going to announce it in a little bit, but we've got some in-person ones coming up as well in the coming weeks and through September, for the first part of September. So very much looking forward to continuing to communicate all that's going on. I'll provide an update on what my team and I have been working on in Washington in the 1st District today. If you have a question, please hit *3. There's only 2 prompts that we ask that we'll have today. It's a question for *3, and then to sign up for the newsletter is *6. So please press *3, and we'll get some questions starting to roll in and getting them in queue so we can have a productive conversation this hour. And while those are coming in, I want to remind everyone that per those election rules I was talking about a moment ago, they go into effect in early September, so I'm actually unable to proactively communicate with anyone who has not opted in to our communications until the general election is over, which is in early November, of course. So please make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter. *6 to subscribe to the newsletter. It's the best way to know about what we're doing, what's going on, what bills are coming up, the work that we're doing in the district, the legislative priorities, my debt and deficit task force, which I have a meeting right after this call, actually, another meeting that we're going to continue to do that work. We put out a recommendations on budget-related matters 4 or 5 months ago, and we want to kind of keep moving forward on that work. It's one of the things that I'm really zeroing in on, and I think it's one of our nation's biggest issues is our national debt and our continual deficit spending that we've done. We put a lot of time into the newsletter, so please, *6 will get you signed up for the newsletter. In fact, I have 3 times the number of newsletter subscribers than I do Twitter followers, and I'm not the biggest Twitter presence. I try to provide more substantive updates through our newsletter than the sort of more the clickbait type of stuff. And I hope that folks would be willing to follow that newsletter. It is not a spam. It does 1 email a week, and it provides important information. I do things like we have our district office go out and do mobile office hours. So when issues with Social Security or IRS or passports come up, we want to be available to folks. And so we put a lot of effort and time into that. It's not the most glamorous part of the congressional world, but it is the most important to constituents. And so I wanted to make sure we do that. And you can always go to our website at blakemore.house.gov to get subscribed. And then, of course, you can follow us on the socials as well. I wanted just to highlight some of the upcoming in-person town halls we're doing. On September 6th, we will have 3, one in Cache, Weber, and Davis counties. Cache County will be at 1 p.m. at the David Haight Alumni Center at Utah State. Weber County will be at 5:30 at the Marriott Slaterville City Building. And then Davis County will be 7:30 at Weber State's Davis campus. But again, we'll have all that information on the newsletter and on the website. So please subscribe by hitting *6. Again, *3 for questions. And as those queue up, we will get going on that. Let me just highlight, give an update on a few bills that have kind of gone through since we last held a town hall. First is the Saline Lakes Ecosystems Act. It's actually a much longer name than that, but that's the easiest way to remember it. Obviously, Saline Lakes, directly referring to the Great Salt Lake. Right before the August district work period, where we're not in session in D.C. for the month of August, we were able to get the Saline Lakes Ecosystems in the Great Basin States Program Act passed. So we're thrilled it passed the House. This bill would establish a scientific monitoring and assessment program to help the Great Salt Lake and other saline lakes in the West. We need to take the best practices that we've seen work and the issues that don't work and provide the mitigation process to making sure that the Great Salt Lake still has the resources and water that it needs. Water is a very, very big, important topic. I can say I just left a meeting this morning with the governor and the entire federal delegations team. Our governor is highly focused on it. Our state legislature is keenly focused on it, and the federal delegation is doing their part as well. And so just know that that is a priority going around, and we will continue to provide updates on everything that's going on with that. But it was nice to be able to play a role at the federal level on passing this really important piece of legislation. The NDAA passed the National Defense Authorization Act. This is the bill that funds our military, that supports Hill Air Force Base and all of the defense equities in the state. The provisions that we were able to put into this included the Hill Air Force Base modernization. There's a building series there that is so antiquated, it is hard to recruit people to go work there because the building and the environment is half a century old, longer than that. World War II level buildings that we have that we need to modernize. Improvements to the UTR test and training range. The Sentinel program remains a top priority to get funded, and we saw that through. A great program for the ground-based strategic deterrent. Better housing for airmen. We've got a big issue with making sure that our military personnel have the housing and the health care that they need. I held a roundtable with a group of families just a few weeks ago, and we need to, we're focused on that. And there's a lot of things that they struggle with, and like when housing prices and cost of living goes up so rampant, folks in the private sector oftentimes can adjust to that a lot easier than our military personnel, and we need to be attuned to that and be able to help that. We were able to do some of that in this year's budget as well. I was appointed to the House Budget Committee. We're really excited about that. Something that I talk a lot about, debt deficit, and why Congress can't get their act together. And I want to dig into this issue. And one of the first steps in that is getting on this committee. And so we're thrilled to be on that. We held a hearing right before the end of the session in July. And I was in a leadership appointed position. Usually all positions are done at the, kind of the start of the session. This was a mid-session deal. I harp on this a lot with my colleagues and leadership recognize that, and they put me on the committee, and I'm thrilled to be getting more involved in these matters. And again, we had two bills signed into law. So those first ones are through the House. They haven't finalized the process yet, but these two bills, the MAPLAND Act and the Better Cybercrimes Metrics Act, were both signed into law. I am focused on legislating. I believe that's what I was elected to do. And I just want you all to know that our team is being very productive on this front, and these are bills that are good for Utah and good for our nation. I'm happy to expound more on them. But just real quick, with the Better Cybercrimes Metrics Act, the motivation for this bill came from these little roundtables that I like to do with certain groups of people: housing, water, small business. And this one came from working with a bunch of cyber type companies. And they said one of the things that we need to do is to make it so companies are more, it's more agreeable, or it's easier for them to submit some of the issues that they're having and the attempted hacks that they have, and they need to feel comfortable doing it. And that's what this bill ultimately does. So it's neat to see like a bill that comes from the ground up, that was a concern from Utah companies, to be able to get that through and signed into law. So try to get through that as quickly as possible. There's a lot going on, and I hope that we can jump into some of these questions. Let me just see who we have first for our first question. And okay, next. So let's go with Rick in Layton. Rick, are you on?
Yes, Congressman Moore. My question is about your response to the unprecedented FBI raid of a former president of the United States, namely President Trump, at Mar-a-Lago, and its implications towards a two-tiered justice system.
Absolutely, Rick. Thank you. And as I talk about what's going on, this is definitely one of them. It's controlled the airwaves. We've never seen this before. So this is unprecedented. What we have to be focused on. So the intel committee, and you'll have judiciary being a heavy part of this. I've interacted with some of our Intel committee members, and we also have Chris Stewart in the state. But Mike Turner is the chair, the ranking member, top Republican on Intel committee, and was on a call recently with them. We need to see the affidavit, and we need to push and demand for transparency here. That's the key piece, is the transparency and accountability on what rose to the level of this action. Right? There's classified information must be handled appropriately. I've lived in that world before. I respect that. I agree with that. In this role, I'm having the opportunity to have a security clearance, and I will, it is imperative that we make sure that we handle classified information properly. But we need to be able to firmly assess, and by having access to the affidavit and ensuring that there's the transparency to understand why this rose to the level that it did is going to be key. This raid was done just a day or two before sort of a 90-day blackout period where federal agencies really can't get involved in anything that's going to be too hyper-political. And that happened just before the deadline. So the FBI knew this would be very political. And I have grave concerns with respect to the timing of it. And we need to be able to assess, are any of this type of documentation, are we dealing with national security measures? And that's what we have to be focused on. I haven't seen anything that would suggest that we are, but I'm not going to make that conclusion yet. I am trying to take in as much information in an ever-changing situation to be able to monitor this and apply the proper approach. I can say that I am very hopeful that we will be able to, as a Republican conference, to take the majority. And I want to provide, we need to provide some balance right now. Right now you have a Democrat in the White House, and then House and Senate are both majorities in the Democrat conference. For the House to be able to flip, this will be key and very important to be able to leverage the oversight and judiciary committees to be able to hold the hearings to really get at the root of the problem here. And I want to be focused on making sure that we are able to do that. I am going to do everything I can to be successful in an upcoming election. I won't talk much about elections on here, but doing that part will be very, very important to be focused on. So I key in on why in the world was it so close to that 90-day period. And I even heard a commentary, a Republican individual that's not even like, a diehard Trump supporter, say something very astute, I thought. And he said, this either needs to end in an indictment for President Trump or for Merrick Garland to be, for him to resign. And that was an interesting concept, right? Like, what rose to the level to do this type of raid? And we need to be able to understand that better. So thank you for the question. We're working on it. We're staying attuned to every piece of information that comes from this, and we'll continue to provide updates as best we can. Okay, let's go to the next caller. Is Randall in Garden City. Randall, are you there?
Yes, I am. So I'm interested in what the net result is supposed to be for the Democrats increasing the IRS manpower by, I think it's 87,000, when the average salary for those guys is going to be a minimum of 100,000 each. So when you do the math, that's several hundred thousands, if not billions of dollars. And it sounded to me like they were only going after like 1 billion maybe for the people that are short on their taxes.
Thank you so much. We put out a statement on this, and it was one of those statements that my comms team laughs and says, another long, very wordy statement again, Blake. But sometimes you have to unpack a whole situation. I represent thousands of IRS agents. I value the work they do. They are key to our constituent service. They show up to my town halls. I hope some of them are on today. And they do yeoman's work. They have a huge job to do, and they don't have enough resources. They don't have an answering service that works well enough. People have to call in at a certain time, and if they don't get to it, it's not sufficient enough. The customer service technologies that exist for the private sector, they need that type of stuff. That doesn't cost $80 billion, though. $80 billion. So I focus more on $80 billion and in one regard and then 87,000 in another. I don't even see how you could find that amount of workforce. My number one issue I continually hear across the district is we can't hire enough people. We don't have enough for our manufacturing plants, or we don't have enough for our restaurants. And that's the number. If I heard one thing consistently, was that we're having a tough time hiring. And to be able just to find that much personnel is going to be tough. That's an enormous amount of money that I don't think that I'm very confident is not targeted in the right places. So this is a classic case of you're going to get Republican messaging on it and you're going to get Democrat messaging on it. The Democrat messaging is, this is only going after the uber wealthy, and we're going to go make sure to hold them accountable so they can pay their fair share. And then Republicans' issue is, like, there is only a finite number of that population that candidly is paying taxes, right? And this is played out to be that, it's just the wealthy are constantly avoiding paying their taxes. That's an indication of a tax code that is far too complex, and that's a whole nother issue to deal with that I would rather be talking about, and I think is a more productive way to address this is simplify the tax code. We don't need to hire more folks to then audit a very complicated tax code. Let's get to that point where we can simplify that, and I'd be very supportive of something like that. But the ultimate downside to this, in my opinion, is that we will not be able to leverage and get the revenue that they were hoping to get out of just the uber wealthy, and you're going to be taxing middle and lower income Americans and small businesses, taxing or auditing or both more than you otherwise would have, and you would have put a hyper focus on that, and it's just going to create more consternation between the two, and there's issues there. So that's essentially the way I view this. Overall, you have a bill that's in the range of $700 to $800 billion, and I think I best articulated this on a recent interview that I did on the radio, where I said, look, when the Democrat leadership took over in the Senate, which we've got to focus as Republicans on how to win elections, and we should have never lost the Georgia Senate race. But when that happened, that put in Democrat leadership's mindset, we have 2 years where we have to go big. And so they did the ARPA, American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion bill, created an enormous rush towards inflation, right? You can even Obama economic advisors will highlight that bill led to so much of the inflation that we're seeing because it added a ton of monetary policy, suppressed our workforce, already on existing supply chain issues. So it was not the bill the American people needed at the time. It was not a COVID bill, and it got masqueraded as that. Then you had a $3.5 trillion bill get introduced that ultimately Senator Manchin and some congressional Democrats, they chopped it down to half of that $3.5 billion to 1.7, and ultimately that wasn't the true cost. There was more cost associated with it, but just pair the numbers, that all got squashed or eliminated by Senator Manchin last year. And then this year, before the end of the session, Democrats are probably feeling a little bit of the pinch with where the economy's at and popularity of their president, saying, we've got to get something done. And folks, my point of all this, and I've already said it for too long, my point is legislation shouldn't be about what can we get done. Legislation be about what is needed in the American people. Oftentimes, nothing is needed, and we just need to let the private sector and the free market do its magic. But right now, you've got Democrat leadership that they're really pushing hard to get something done. And so what will Manchin allow for us to do? And this was the ultimate bill, was the Inflation Reduction Act. Horrible name for it. I don't agree with the name at all, and most experts agree with that. But even so, this is a bill that went from 3.5 trillion to 800 billion. But even that, this is not the direction that we needed to be going. This is not what we needed to layer in after several $1 trillion worth of introduced spending under Democrat leadership right now. And it's all done mostly because there's a political timeline and there was this rush to do it before midterm elections. So I know that your question was about IRS, but that's just what I wanted to highlight was this: you should not be raising taxes when we're experiencing negative GDP growth. And to say that we need to put more IRS agents out just for this sole purpose is not something I support, even though I value the work that our IRS agents in Ogden and across the country do. But I do not support this much spending and this approach. Okay, so we need more questions, folks. So *3, please jump on with *3, and of course *6 is to do the newsletter. We'll go to the next question that is in Layton. I'm trying to move through these and not spend too much time on each one. Joshua in Layton, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so my concern was that us at Hill Air Force Base were having a really hard time with the current pay situation. The inflation peaked at 9% this year, but our pay raise was somewhere around 3%. And what's happening is a lot of people are leaving Hill Air Force Base, so those who are left behind, our workload has gone up, but value-wise, our pay has gone down. And we're having a hard time making ends meet now, paying for food, paying for gas, paying our house, everything. And I'm wondering what needs to happen for us to get an appropriate pay raise.
Absolutely. Josh, I assume you're a civilian?
Yes. Former military.
Okay, well, former military, now civilian. Well, thank you. Obviously, thank you for serving the mission. One thing that we have really tried hard on is to eliminate the 180-day rule that exists, or the waiver for it right now, but we want to permanently get rid of that because it just makes it harder for our active duty and military folks to be able to transition for arbitrary reasons. And so that's an area that we've been heavily focused on. You've kind of done that process. You are 100% right. The number is actually 4.6 is the estimates that we have it at with respect to the FY23 NDAA. So up from 3% to 4.6. But as you mentioned, that's still only half of what inflation is, and puts our military, our defense personnel in a tough spot. But it is the largest increase in, say, 20 years or something. So, folks, there's an understanding of there's the issue, but we haven't been able to meet it yet. First off, what I want to do is not create 9% inflation. And that's one of the key things that I feel like is the most important aspect to address. And I think most people could agree with that, because the acute issues we see with that rapid of an increase in inflation is detrimental to people like you. Davis County housing prices are skyrocketing, and that's good for some, right? But it is really, really tough for our military, active duty, civilian, reservists, you name it, guard. It makes it really, really tough because you can't react to the marketplace as easily as someone in the private sector. If I'm my previous career, I could have gone to my boss and said, look, I've got another 2 or 3 offers, and would you be able to match it? And that's just not, our DOD work is not set up that way. So I know you understand the problem, but just know that at least in this NDAA, we were able to get a larger increase than before. I'm working heavily on making sure that we have the right economic policy in our country so we don't have this type of crazy inflation. You'll see housing prices come down a little bit, or they'll taper off a little bit with interest rates continuing to go up. This NDAA, though, it does provide a 2.4 pay bonus for enlisted personnel, counteract some of the impacts. They're in a tough spot as well. There is a $500 million for additional housing allowances to counteract that. Again, in the right direction, not all the way satisfactory. But Josh, if I could just say one thing, is it's known we're working on everything we possibly can within the framework that we do. We got a plus up in the defense budget that President Biden had originally put out, and we even had Democrats strongly support this, so they went against their own leadership to make sure that they had this plus up. One of the main pieces of conversation I introduced to this group of military families the other day, and there was some civilian, mostly active duty, but it all applies, was that, we need to make sure that we don't have so much attrition. Folks like you that are looking at the private sector and saying, oh, I could probably make significantly more money at this company. We can't lose you, because that is detrimental to the mission, and that is we have to be focusing on, and the ways to do that is to make sure we properly incentivize folks to stay. And in what a lot of lawmakers have a tough time with, they're only seeing what's right in front of them on what that initial dollar amount is. But if we were to incentivize more people to stay, it's actually a cost savings over time. And that's the part that I want to do whatever I can to add my voice into communicating how we can save money over time by encouraging more folks to stay. And I will continue to try to be a voice on this. There should be very simple calculations you could do. If we lose, if the active duty, if we lose a pilot to, say, a major airline, like, what does that cost the military? It costs a lot. If we were to incentivize them to stay a little bit more, they still want to serve the mission. Well, what can we do? That same rule applies to the civilian side as well. So thank you for the question. It's a priority. It's not perfect yet, but we do have to get our economic policy in our nation under control so we're not experiencing such crazy rampant inflation, which I know hurts all Americans. Okay, so again, *3 for questions, *6 for newsletter. Taking any questions. Audra from Syracuse. Audra, are you on?
Yes. I wanted to, at the beginning of this town hall, you mentioned all the things you had voted for to spend our money. What are you doing to cut the spending? Are you willing to take back that money that was just given to the IRS and the Republicans take over the House? Or are you willing to take away their guns and ammunition? Because why does the IRS need to be militarized? Can't law enforcement handle that?
Correct. Right. So just to clarify, a lot of the spending that I've talked about, I definitely voted against. So let me make sure that's very clear, which you weren't insinuating it wasn't, but I just want to make sure that I'm very clear. The bills that I had signed into law, these are not large fiscal notes, and so wouldn't really play into the large federal budget. But I do, but I did support the NDAA, and the NDAA is a large bill. So this goes into, for 22, 23 or so years, we have run federal deficits. And over the course of our nation's history, we've ran far more. There's been far more years where we've ran a deficit than when we ran a balanced budget. Now, at the state level, and particularly Utah, which I'm very proud to be, in that world, and our legislature and our governor do a great job in ensuring this. We always do it at the state level, but over time, we oftentimes run deficits, and they're usually for something like a war or an infrastructure project, or something pops up, and you go through a great recession, and 2008 hits, and the Depression. We have always shown, the federal government has always shown the American people that it has an ability to get back to a balanced budget. And if you look, I'm a little bit wonky and nerdy on this, but if you look at the history of our debt and deficit in our nation, every 10 to 15 years, we're always back to a balanced budget. And we give that confidence back to the American taxpayer, the American consumer, and as a show of force to the rest of the world, that we're sound fiscally, that we're able to, not nearly as sound as like a Utah, but Utah doesn't have a Fed, doesn't have a printing capacity, things like that. So state and federal government's a little different, but the federal government has always found a way to get back to a balanced budget. for the last 22 years, and folks, this is a large reason that kind of spurred me to want to run for office, was to be a part of this. And if you talk to me about what it is that we can cut, like, we have a whole 8-page document called the Debt and Deficit Recommendations from 2022. And if you just Google or go to our website, you can usually just Google Blake Moore and debt. So just go into your Google browser and type in Blake Moore debt. An 8-page document will pop up, and it talks and it breaks it down into 4 specific areas of what we can be doing to address our deficit issues, right? Every single government agency doesn't run very efficiently. There's lots to address there. There's ways to do our military budget more efficiently, and I've been trying to be a voice on that, providing private sector opportunities into our housing and development capabilities. It's called enhanced use lease. The Air Force Base actually does it really well. But we need to incorporate that into more housing options. And the mayor of Clearfield, Mark Shepard, is doing a very good job at coming up with innovative ideas. The surrounding cities would appreciate it as well. And, you know, you've got really good local leaders working on this. Entitlement reform is key. We've had the same type of Social Security process for decades and century almost. And if we're not willing to address that, then we won't ever get out of into a position where we can have sound fiscal deficit, the reduction of deficit spending. Medicare is largely into healthcare is got numerous fiscal cliffs up ahead that we've got to be able to address. We have to make our healthcare system run more efficiently. It has to run with more transparency and accountability, similar, to very common things that we can get involved with. But the healthcare system right now operates like a hybrid. Like, is it kind of government controlled? Well, everything's based off of Medicare and reimbursement rates anyway. That's really tough to run a business because your costs are increasing, but your reimbursements are going one way. And then we want to embrace the private sector as well, and we're just kind of caught in the middle, and it's tough politically. So those are the areas. The mandatory spending of our portion of our budget is the part that we've got to be able to address, and that's the part that's growing so heavy. And I can say that when Republicans were sort of in control of the budgeting process from, let's say, 2012 to 2018, or maybe 2010 to 2018. The discretionary spending didn't increase. Like, it stayed. We were able to cut a lot of the deficit spending. Now, Republicans still take criticism for not balancing the budget, and I get that. But that's because of our mandatory spending doesn't even really go through the congressional process at all. It just gets put on autopilot, and we are not able to, take innovative ideas and come up with ways to address that. And with an aging population, it's going to become more and more expensive. So this is something that I could go on and on about, and so I'm gonna kind of end this part of it. But if you really want to know the areas that I want to address in our federal budget, please go take a look at that document, and I'll continue to work with that task force to find areas that of spending that we can cut. And this IRS bill just barely passed. Yeah, anything's on the table. If we get back into the majority, we need to look at everything. If there's COVID money left over, that reallocate that before you try to do any more additional spending. There's been numerous, proposals for that, and they all kind of, they oftentimes fall on deaf ears to some degree. Those are things that I'd be very much open to. Okay, so let's get going here again. Sandy from Camas.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. I was just calling. My question is, first, what are the plans to build back up the strategic petroleum reserves, and what are you or Republicans trying to do to get more, to get our energy sources going back, our oil and gas production built back up?
Yep, absolutely. We talk a lot about this. It's obviously been the topic of every town hall I've done. So I'll be brief on this. first off, the strategic oil reserves, we need to take a look at history and recognize how backwards we just did things. And a person that I would point you to from Texas, Dan Crenshaw, he does a really good job, and he's talked about the strategic reserves quite a bit. We had a time during COVID that we could have actually added to the strategic reserves when oil prices were very low, put them in the reserves, and then if we wanted to use them during this time period, we could have, and we would have made money. Like it makes so much financial sense, but it was, we don't want to do any more oil than we can, or we've got to just avoid that. But then all of a sudden, when we're in the situation we're in over the last year, President Biden was willing to take from the strategic oil reserves, and it was the opposite effect. It was taking from a cheaper source when it's more expensive instead of doing the opposite. And so it's just ridiculous. And so when oil prices dip and there's less demand, which I don't see in the near future, you can add to the reserves, and I'd be supportive of that. But otherwise, I've got a bill. There's a whole. It's part of a conglomerate of 6 pieces of legislation. Mine's included in that, the Protecting American Energy Act. It's about getting our process streamlined, the leasing and the permitting process. President Biden, the thing that he did that has added so much negative speculation and driven away investment from this industry was the executive orders that he did, and that on its own just takes investment away. It creates higher prices. There's again, oil prices are global, but when you divert interest and investment away and give an unpredictable market, prices go up. And it's ultimately what President Biden and co wanted to do, but ultimately it hasn't lowered our need for it. It's only raised prices. It hasn't reduced emissions. Instead, I'm very much supportive of investing in our own capability, securing up our national security position, but also, we do it better, cleaner, faster, with better labor standards than anywhere could, and I want to support that. If we do support that, we can actually reduce emissions. So it's all about what we'd be able to get passed through. We'll have solid legislation. We'll be able to use and leverage other key pieces of the process if we're in the majority. President Biden can still veto things, but there will be a strong focus on making sure that we get strong energy production, and in doing so, we can lead the world. There's lots of other great options. We need to reform NEPA so we can embrace more renewable technology. Right, nuclear is a baseload power that doesn't emit pollution, and would be an option that we can look at. And there's lots of other things like that. So I've been heavily involved in that, and obviously focused on energy. Let's go to Chip from Smithfield. Chip, are you still on?
Yeah, I am. Some of my question just got answered in the one that you just finished addressing. Yeah. I just finished trashing a petition addressed to you that was against fracking. And my assumption is that you are for U.S. energy independence, and that fracking is one method of helping tap the energy that we have available to us. So is that true?
Yes, sir. Let me be brief with this too. So thank you for recognizing it and not double asking. That's kind of you. What I'll say on the fracking piece, this went sideways in Europe a decade or so ago, maybe even longer. In Europe, it's bad, fracking's bad. Well, fracking and natural gas actually reduce emissions more than anything else has reduced emissions in the last in our energy in our entire energy portfolio. Right, it has done more to do that. There are negative externalities. Some of the methane we've got to figure out a way to capture. Oil and gas production, we can embrace carbon capture and provide the markets to do so. I am firmly supportive of that. But unequivocally, yes, I'm supportive of American energy independence. Unequivocally, yes, supportive of fracking. And we have Europe. Not something I'm thankful for, but we have Europe to thank on looking at their process. They went away from fracking and from nuclear, and right now they're okay with that because they're buying natural gas from Russia, which fracks to get their gas to Europe. So it makes absolutely no sense that you wouldn't want to own the system and create it yourself. I trust European nations to do it better and cleaner than Russia every day of the week and twice on Sunday, and more so than America, and of course even more so than for the U.S. to do it. But now Europe is in a place where they have to reignite coal power plants, right? And so, like, let's be thoughtful and strategic about how we do this, decision makers, and figure out what the goals are. You've got good companies like ClearPath, and I encourage you to go take a look at them, that have like this 2050 plan that I think is a good, solid response to what we're going through right now. To think that far out and think this is how we could transition, or we could build more energy options for us, right? And we do that, we create opportunities that can improve things along the way. So natural gas, supportive, great industry out in the Uinta Basin for this, and I'm encouraged that we can kind of get back to that. We're still producing a lot with this, and if we would just streamline our permitting and leasing process and reduce some of the regulation, which I know is what Joe Manchin is trying to do here as well, this could be a positive. So thank you. Jody from Syracuse.
Hey, Congressman. Hi. Thank you so much for doing this town hall. I appreciate it. It's great to hear your voice this afternoon. My question might be a little bit different from some that have been asked so far. I just found out about a Veterans History Project that you're involved with the Library of Congress. I would love to know what that is and if there's any way that I could help or be involved with that.
Jody, thank you. That really is great. I appreciate it. Thanks for noticing. First off, more than anything, thanks for noticing. This is a really neat project my team is very excited about. And this is going to interview as many veterans as we possibly can. And what drives me to be about this is a little emotional. I would want nothing more than to have an interview of my grandpa. Supportive. He didn't talk about the war much. He was in the South Pacific in World War II. And he's a hero, in my opinion. And he's got a scrapbook. He's got some cool photos and some awards that we have as heirlooms and things like that. But to have him be interviewed about it would absolutely be one of the coolest things. So, folks, everybody out there, you all know veterans in your life. Every single person on this call knows a veteran or is one. Please go to our website, and there's a form you can fill out, of an interest form to do it. We're leveraging a studio that they're going to donate time to us. We're going to have Weber State students, their communication students, conduct some of the interviews, and it's all part of the Library of Congress. And I want our district to be, the first district to lead out on this. You've got towns like Clearfield that call themselves, military city, all of Davis County, Weber County, and our workforce goes into Box Elder County, just directly related to Hill Air Force Base. Like, we have a very, very rich veteran and military history here. So please go to the website, look up Veterans History Project, and get someone, a loved one, a friend, someone signed up to do this. It won't be a big burden on them. They just get to talk about their experience, and families can use it, but then we also put it into a big, larger project. So it'll be awesome. So thank you so much for noticing that, and we'll keep communicating it and putting it in the newsletter. All right, let's go to North Logan. Wallace from North Logan.
Yes, thank you. I just was interested in your veteran comment. Just real quickly to amplify, I got a letter 2 months ago from a lady I've never met that said thank you and hope she got a hold of the right person. My father had carried her father, an English artilleryman, off the battlefield and saved his life. And she said we wouldn't be here if he hadn't done that. So that's inspiring to hear you doing that. My question is more.
Awesome.
I'm a retired military person. I helped bring up First Office of National Drug Control in Washington, D.C., drug control policy. I'm very, very concerned about this immigration thing going on at our borders, not only because of the numbers coming across, Congressman, but because of all of the spin-off issues that that's going to create in housing and drugs and homelessness and health care. And some of the cities like New York are offering health care. I mean, if we think about all of the numbers here, just the sheer numbers, it's amazing. It's staggering. And having worked along those borders and in the South American countries, I have come to understand the drug cartel, and I'm very, very concerned that I watch the Texas National Guard stand at the gate and the Federals come and open it. The things that are happening are illegal. It's not immigration. Why can't we get that stopped?
Thank you, Wallace. I can feel the frustration and desperation in your voice. Let me talk about a couple of real concerns for me, and then I want to hit on why can't we? It is less even about a border wall. It is about just implementing policy. The first line of defense is a three-pronged approach to immigration policy. It's sound policy. It is border protections and security at the border, and which does not just come with a wall either. It doesn't need to be a wall from sea to sunny sea. We need presence. We need drone capability, technology. There's all sorts of different, there's a pronged approach to that as well. And then the third is there is an immigrant workforce that we need. We absolutely need more H-1B visas, H-1A visas, and encouraging that to come across legally. And there are numerous Utah businesses and organizations that want that and push for that. And we're, as a case working team, always trying to help with that side of it. But let me just highlight a couple things. One, the term rainbow fentanyl should highly concern any single American, particularly if you have kids or grandkids. Fentanyl is now coming across. It's being, it looks like candy. It is one of the most, you saw us as a nation address tobacco advertising that seemed to be targeting younger Americans. And we took a stand. We said as a society, we don't support that. And we held individuals accountable. I'm good with that. I love that. I remember looking at case studies in my university classes about that specific issue. We are seeing it with far, far dangerous drugs than anything that we've seen in the abundance of what's coming through our border right now, and rainbow fentanyl is one of them. Second thing is, I was at the day I was at the border a few months ago was the day that a National Guardsman, it was from the Texas Air National Guard, was recovered from the Rio Grande, and it was a blip news piece. That guardsman went out to rescue likely illegal immigrant. Well, they were coming across the river. So yes, they were. Went out to go rescue them because they looked as if they were drowning, and these people were not. I don't think they were armed or in any way dangerous. This individual was going out to save somebody that was illegally crossing the border, and in doing so, he died. And his grandma has to live with that. That's happening far too often. I just saw the rep from San Antonio area. It's a good friend of mine, Tony Gonzalez from Texas. He just posted that 3 more people died. Like, this is a humanitarian crisis. And the part that frustrates me is if somebody would have died coming across the border when Trump was in office, he would have gotten blamed, and this would have been the biggest thing in the media. And the opposite isn't true. So when we talk double standard and things like that, this is an area that this is a humanitarian crisis, and you don't see the same criticism that you saw earlier. President Trump had a really, really sound piece of policy, and that's what I'll end with, is the Remain in Mexico policy. All it means is you make your request for asylum. You absolutely, we're gonna take that, and we're gonna take it into consideration, and we're gonna do it as expeditiously as we possibly can. But you have to remain in country of origin. Only a very few percentage, a low percentage that goes through this are legit claims. But that Remain in Mexico policy was working, and it was alleviating pressure from the border, because when you just say come in and wait here, and then that's when the issues arise, because that's what emboldens the cartels. And I won't belabor it much more, but you embolden the cartels, you increase crime, trafficking, and drugs, and that's what's going on. So we need to implement better sound policy. If President Biden would even just do that one thing, and recognize that would be better off for him if he did that politically, no question would be a better policy. But it doesn't make any sense to me, and it's just one of those things that hopefully, if we're in the majority, we can do a better job holding accountable, using our oversight positions to do so. I held a hearing on it just a few months ago from my oversight position on natural resources that we've posted about and put information out there. So thank you for the question. I can tell your concern over it. I've got a Peter on the line. I don't know where Peter's from, but Peter, last name starts with a P.
Yeah, Congressman, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, I'm calling from Ogden. I'm a constituent. I'm also local chairman for Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, number 136 here in Ogden, and I wanted to call and ask for your support in our struggle to get a fair contract, new national agreement between the railroads and our associated unions. In all likelihood, we've been without a contract for 2 years. We've been negotiating for a long time. In all likelihood, this will end up going to Congress, and you all will end up drafting legislation that ends up as our contract. And I'm just very concerned that if it isn't fair enough, we're talking about an industry that since 2017 has cut 33% of its workforce. I'm concerned that this becomes a major drag on the economy and a major problem with supply chain issues, because we're talking about an industry that fuels everything in America, and you're talking about people that work. Go ahead, Congressman.
Peter, let me add to that. Yeah, let me add to that, because there's even a more hyper focus right now on the inland port issue, or inland port potential in Utah. And we're going to need a strong rail system. And we need anytime you have any type of service like this, you have to have a strong workforce and people willing to do this job. And so let me just say this. You've got on this call much of my legislative team. So they're hearing this issue as well. They've already sent me a quick little side note. Make sure I would love to meet with you and just kind of get a sense for what's going to come down the pike with respect to legislation. And we will definitely represent the voices, especially of constituents. And we are the train locomotive district of the world. It's the golden spike is on all of our branding, and we need to make sure to recognize that. And I think that you're going to see a resurgence. You go through history, you see the importance of rail kind of ebb and flow, and I think it's on a really strong uptick right now. With the solutions you all can provide. So thanks for the information. Definitely please contact us separately so we can set something up.
We'll do that. Thank you, Congressman.
Yeah, awesome. Let me go to Marianne from Clinton. I'm trying to be quick as we wrap this up here. Marianne from Clinton.
Hi. I'm grateful that you are taking my question. I'm not sure how I got in on this because I'm not a Republican, but I am very grateful that you're taking the question. I'm just concerned as I hear a lot of talk about if you are able to, you will undo everything that's being done in the current day, how you're going to address a lot of
Marianne, I lost you, Marianne. Can you still hear? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry, okay. I'm just concerned as you talk about, walking back all of these things that have recently been passed about Utah's climate concerns and environmental concerns, and just how you're going to address the pressing concerns we have right now. And as you talked about fracking and how much water that takes, and it just really worries me. So I was just kind of wanting you to address that, because fracking takes an incredible amount of water, and it just thrashes that water. It's not usable anymore.
Absolutely, no, Mary.
That.
And I absolutely appreciate the question. There are no easy answers anymore. There's no easy solutions, that's for sure. And water's a key issue. I just left a meeting with the governor's team and the delegation and our Senate president and Speaker of the House. One of my main bills is the Great Salt Lake bill, and so we have to. We don't have the solutions on what we're going to be doing water-wise going forward, but we have to get there. We are in a major drought. I hope we come out of it in the coming years. The Great Salt Lake levels have been low in the 60s before. We just hit more 100-degree temperatures than I think in history in the Salt Lake, at least, area when they register it at into the airport or something. I don't know the exact details on it, but we have problems here, and we have less water in the system, so it's less to go around. That is not fracking, at least in the Utah perspective, is not where majority of water usage goes. Agriculture is hugely important, and we have to make sure to protect that. We've got to find ways as community members to conserve as much water as possible, and hopefully this is a drought cycle and we can come out of it a little bit more. And time will tell, and I think 2 to 3 years will be a significant decision on what we do. But I hope you have at least noticed, every time I talk about energy, I talk about reducing emissions, and that is going to be my voice, and that is the leading voice that we need to have as a Republican Party, to making sure that we're talking about sustainable ways to reduce emissions. And because nuclear also takes water, but we also need to reduce emissions, right? And I don't see us going back to horse and buggy anytime soon. So, and I'm not being flippant, that just highlights that there is so many tough issues to be dealing with. But I appreciate the concern. I just know that I am trying to find a way to balance all of those concerns. There was one other question, and I think I got the topic on it, so I won't jump to it, but it was about the CHIPS Act, Taiwan. If China invades Taiwan, we have a major problem with our chip manufacturing. No questions. I've been supportive of the CHIPS Act. The amount of mandatory spending that was done on the CHIPS Act, it was the concern. We cannot continue to add mandatory spending, because then Congress can't do its job in ever getting us to some sense of fiscal normalcy. And we've seen that ploy used in legislation over the last year, and we've got to be able to fix that. But the CHIPS Act, in theory, it's the right direction. I've sponsored legislation that's actually very similar to that, on a much smaller scale. But it was a very, very, very expensive bill, and not targeted, I think, at all the right areas. But it was also used to get other bills through. And so it was leveraged in a way that I strongly disagree with. But that didn't come until after the Senate vote. So the senators that came together on that wasn't, the CHIPS Act was largely popular. It just, when it got to the House, it was always convoluted with a bunch of other nonsense. But anyway, look, folks, *6, please sign up for the newsletter. We want to communicate reliably and with more context to you all. And that comes to our newsletter. I appreciate your involvement and your engagement here. Going to keep at this. We will be doing some upcoming town halls. Thank you for all the questions. Please, my staff is going to try to give folks a call this week if we weren't able to get to your question answered. We've had a lot of callers and not able to get to everybody. And we just appreciate your engagement. So we'll keep communicating with you all. Thank you so much.